How will the Carolina Panthers approach the NFL's new kickoff rule? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. We're starting again next Friday on the 26th. I'm back here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. So how do you get those questions into me? By either adding me or DMing me. But of course, you can follow me first on Twitter at Julian Council. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We've talked about the Panthers offense. We talked about the Panthers defense. And today we're going to talk special teams. Now, I will be doing a State of the Defense podcast tomorrow, but because fantasy, when you pick a team's defense, you also pick their special teams. I figured, why not talk special teams today? And then we can wrap all up with defense tomorrow on the show. And I got a lot to say, man. I'm very interested to see how it's going to work out special teams wise this year, because there are new rules, really a new rule when it comes to how the NFL is going to do kickoffs this season. It may change back to how it was once 2025 rolls around, but at least here in 2024, the NFL has a new kickoff rule. Why does the NFL have a new kickoff rule? Well, according to the league, the new rules were put into place to address the lowest kickoff return rate in NFL history during the 2023 season and an unacceptable rate of injuries on kickoffs prior to that. The new rule will keep the excitement of kickoff returns in the game, returning the injury rate closer to that of a traditional scrimmage play. So we'll see where that ends up being the case, but the NFL is going to try this out this season. Now, according to a lot of people out there who report upon this, the kickoff rule is similar to what you would see with the XFL, UFL, USFL. I don't ever watch any of the spring football stuff. I'm not interested in it. I know you may be interested in it. Widely looking at the numbers of the ratings, public's not super interested in spring football. I think it's great that there's a developmental league and that these guys are getting an opportunity to develop there, then come and play in the NFL. I think it's a great thing. It's just not something I'm interested in watching, but the NFL clearly has been paying attention, and they've taken the kickoff rule that they use there, at least a variation of it, and they're bringing it to their league this year, and they're trying to bring back the kick returner. That used to be something that mattered. And in recent years, hasn't really mattered who catches it. And last year when talking to y'all, I said, I don't really care who's kicking, who's going to be the kick returner, who's going to be the punt returner. All I care about is catch the ball. Catch the ball, fair catch. That's all you need to do. That's all it really mattered. But now they want these guys to catch the ball and to actually do something with it and to bring that back to being something. Remember, he hate me and how important that he was to the Panthers back when he was here, back in the mid-early aughts. I'm happy to have another he hate me. Maybe somebody who comes from the UFL, as I believe the USFL and XFL have combined, thanks to The Rock and some other people out there. Now the rules. And I went on the NFL website. They had a video. I wrote down all this because I honestly, up until recording the show a couple hours ago, had no clue what the rule was. I just knew that apparently it's similar, and I still need to see it with my own eyes to really understand what exactly is happening. But this is how they broke it down for me and how I'm going to break it down for you. The kicking team will now kick off from its 35-yard line. 10 members of the kicking team, so the other people that aren't the kicker, will line up on the receiving team's 40-yard line. That is different. A minimum of 9 members of the receiving team will then line up between the 30 and 35-yard lines. Play begins when the ball is either caught or hits the ground in the landing zone. What is the landing zone? The landing zone is the area between the receiving team's 20-yard line and it's end zone. So play begins when the ball is either caught or hits the ground in the landing zone or is returned from the end zone. Any kick that returns in the landing zone, any kick that lands in the landing zone must be returned. Any kick that bounces from the landing zone into the end zone must be returned or downed by the receiving team for a touchback and possession at its 20-yard line. That's something that we're familiar with. If a kick fails to reach the 20-yard line, that's much like the rule before you kick ball out of the bounds. The receiving team takes possession at its 40-yard line. The ball enters the end zone in the air. The receiving team can return it or down it and take possession at its 30-yard line. So do not kick the ball into the air, into the end zone, or you're giving up 10 extra yards, which is not ideal. If the ball goes out of bounds, this is one rule that has not changed. Receiving team takes possession at its 40-yard line. So two ways to get the ball at the 40 is either the kick fails to reach the 20-yard line or the kick goes out of bounds. There are no more fair catches. No more. You got to either down it on a knee or return it. No more fair catching. And honestly, if I was a coach, the way that the rule was, I would always tell them the fair catch. Let's just get our guaranteed yardage. Don't you sit back here and only get to the 10-yard line when we could already be at 20 or 25. I don't want to see any of that. So no fair catch. That's no longer allowed. Onside kicks are permitted in the fourth quarter. And that's probably the one thing about the rule where I guess got to see it, really. I'm not really against it. I'm not really for it. The one thing I do not like is dictating when onside kicks are permitted. Now, the way the onside kick has been changed where you can't even run before it's being kicked, they're hard to get anyways. But what I like is when a team catches another team off guard by starting off the second half with an onside kick or going onside in the third quarter, second quarter, whenever. I don't like that they're telling teams when you're allowed to go with the onside kick because you're taking away a strategy play. Now, it's hard to get them. I understand that. Just mentioned it. I don't love that about the rule change. If anything, that's the only thing I dislike. Everything else, I just got to see it play out really before I have a true opinion. But that, I don't like that. And then lastly, setup and landing zones do not change after penalties or a safety. So the common unsportsmanlike conduct after a player dares to celebrate their achievement of scoring a touchdown, that will not change where the landing zone is. The only thing that changes is the spot of the ball where it's going to be kicked. That's the only thing that will change. So you'll be kicking off at the 50 in that situation where the players will still be at the 40, at 35 and 30, and then in the landing zone, still the 20-yard line, and the rules and all that are still the same. So how do these rules impact the Carolina Panthers? That is a question that I was asked. And quite simply, I don't know. I don't know how this is going to impact the team right now. Now, my thought is they need to find a reliable returner as the return game is now back. Like Devin Hester. I remember when I was growing up, Devin Hester was a guy at Miami who I loved watching return kicks, goes to the Bears, return that opening kick in the Super Bowl. Remember that same year where Ted Ginn Jr. for Ohio State brought with the kick in the College Football National Championship. Later, a month later, you got to happen in Super Bowl with Devin Hester and the Bears, who still did not win that game. But Devin Hester was awesome. He's a guy that one of the best returners of all time in the NFL. I brought up He Hate Me, Rod Smart, when he was here in Carolina. I think it's cool that the returners are back. And the Panthers need to be focused on finding the right guys to return kicks for them and to take advantage of this new rule. And the person asked me about, will they implement a strategy like the Chiefs potentially are going to use with Jordan Reed, who's going to be maybe their kicker, because that adds another defender, as they're going to need that, and not having your kicker as the last line of defense. I don't know, because before you would want a kicker who just kick it out of bounds for a touchback, because you were able to win this field position game. You weren't having to potentially have to defend the kick, and that's why the NFL's changed this rule. I don't think that they're going to have, say, Sam Franklin be the kicker. Remember a couple years ago when Zane Gonzalez got hurt in Buffalo and had to go to Brandon Zylstra? I don't know if there's a Brandon Zylstra on the team right now. I wouldn't want Brandon Zylstra to be the guy, by the way. I'd rather have a safety like Jordan Reed, or Justin Reed, rather, being the kicker in that situation. I don't know if the Panthers have that guy in the roster. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. I do believe Dave Canales was asked about this during OTAs, whether they would do that, and he didn't really have much of an answer. And also is like, we're still trying to figure out what exactly we're doing here. This is something that Tracy Smith, Darren Bates, two special teams coordinators here in Carolina, certainly need to be asked. And I hope that they answer that. And we'll answer these questions at some point here as training camp is about to get going next week, y'all. We're almost there. So, yeah, how does it impact the Panthers? We will see. But the number one thing I'm thinking about, you need to find a reliable kick returner. And who is that going to be? Is Xavier Legette ready to take over as not just the future at the wide receiver position, but potentially an impact player on special teams in a return game? Raheem Blackshear, is he going to be that? Amir Smith-Marset is going to go from punt returning to kick returning. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets the first pitch. With Carol last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time tends to get work out of buying MLB tickets. And right now, we got All-Star Week going on. If you want to go over to Game Time and save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I do not know how the new kickoff rule is going to impact the Panthers. I do not know how they're going to approach that. Those are questions for Dave Canales, for Tracy Smith, and for Darren Bates, and anyone else in that building and on the roster. I can't answer that for you because I still don't necessarily know what the hell is going on with this new kickoff rule. I have a better understanding now than I did 3 hours ago when I was putting together my notes for today's show, but I still haven't seen it. I need to see it because I'm not going to watch. I don't know. I think is the season over for the UFL and all that. I assume it's probably over. I don't know. I'm not going to go back and watch all that. Let's wait till I guess the Hall of Fame game. First time we get to see it in living color in the NFL. So I'm going to wait till then, and then I'll have more of an understanding. And of course, I'm sure anybody, maybe your boy, will ask about it once training camp gets going here next week. Next week, y'all. Only 9 days away from the beginning of practice. The one thing I do know, as far as this goes, the Panthers are going to need to find someone who can return kicks because that is going to now be important. Once again, there was going to be true value in having a quality kick returner. And it's not like there hasn't been value in that. It's always one of the things where it's value, but how valued is it? All those years we were trying to find who's going to be the punt returner, who's going to be the kick returner. They had Chris McCaffrey. You go back to Chris McCaffrey's time in college at Stanford, he was the best kick returner in college football because it's the NFL. They're getting paid. He's already taking all these hits as a running back and a receiver. My God, he can't return kicks. Just what could happen to him? He's likely just going to fair catch it. We're not even getting a chance at all in kick returns. And punt returns, likely going to fair catch it, but you cannot risk him at all. DJ Moore, he couldn't catch the ball his rookie year as a punt returner. And you see Tyreek Hill doesn't really get the opportunities anymore. The NFL just has no interest in having their actual best players be a returner unless it's a special situation where then are they really trying to kick to those guys in the first place. So it's now back to being valuable, but not that valuable as the league is never going to put their marquee players back there to return kicks because I guess injury risk and all that, even though any play you could get hurt. But I guess that's adding another hit to the body, potentially, another risk, and yada, yada, yada. I'm probably wrong about this. I'll be wrong about it, but I don't get it. I don't want to hear you complain about, who we're going to have to return kicks when you have guys who can return kicks. You just don't want to use them. Okay, but who's likely to return kicks, though, here in Carolina in the rant? Raheem Blackshear was the primary kick returner for the Panthers last year. Laviska Shenault was injured. The guy that people said, he's kind of like a Deebo Samuel, even though he's not good at all. But Raheem Blackshear was pretty good returning kicks. 16 returns last year for 430 yards. That was the sixth most in the NFL. He had 26.9 yards per return. And looking at players that had at least 15 returns last year, that was the second most among those players. So really solid Raheem Blackshear was in the return game. I would expect that he would be another one of those guys getting an opportunity, as you have 9 guys that have to be lined up between the 30 and 35, and then you can only have 2 guys back there return kicks. My guess heading into all of this is that Raheem Blackshear will be one of those 2 starting off that would return kicks after the production you had from him last year. Amir Smith-Marset, I'm guessing probably going to be the punt returner again. No changes with that rule this season. Maybe it's an opportunity as a kick returner this year. But last year, looking at his punt returns, he had 37 of them for 322 yards. That was sixth most in the NFL. Looking at his yards per return, 8.7 yards per return. That was 17th out of the 23 qualifying players in the NFL, according to Pro Football Reference. He had a 79-yard touchdown on that Thursday night game against Chicago, where he showed that speed and the ability to bring it to the house. So we'll see if it's an opportunity. I think he's probably still going to be stuck as a punt returner. Maybe not stuck. Let's not say stuck as a punt returner, but he will be earmarked as the primary punt returner here in Carolina this season, heading into training camp. The other guy, and I think the guy everyone's thinking about as being, you got to get this guy out there, is first-round pick out of South Carolina, Xavier Legette. Last year, well, not last year, his career with the Gamecocks, 29 kickoff returns, 26.4 yards per return, which is right there close to what Raheem Blackshear did last season in the NFL. And you're going to get more opportunities in college than in the NFL to return kicks. And he returned a touchdown for, I think it was against A&M a couple of years ago, returned a kickoff for a touchdown coming off injury. That's when he had the scooter/motorcycle, whatever incident that hurt him. And he got a nickname for that. That's after that first game he came back. That's when he took it to the house. Last year, he was clocked as the fastest ball carrier in college football when he returned a 76-yard touchdown against Mississippi State at 22.3 miles per hour. 22.3 miles per hour. This man can scoot. And he's huge, as we've seen. Legette needs to be out there. I don't know what you're going to get out of him as a wide receiver right away, but I want to get a lot out of him as a kick returner. Him and Blackshear, those are two guys I want to see it. In the preseason, probably need to see it because you got to get used to it. I know, and I'm this guy who's went on the rant being like, well, you don't want to risk your valuable players in those situations. But yes, you need to see him actually do it in live action. I think it should be him and Blackshear, just as things currently sit with the likely returners. You got Thielen, you got Johnson as your top two receivers, and you want to have Legette also be a better number 3 than you got last year. Maybe even turn out to be number 2. Hell, maybe he turns out to be number 1 right away. I'm not going to place those expectations on him, but I will place expectations on him when it comes to returning kickoffs this season because, damn, this man needs to be returning kicks. He's got too much speed. He should be able to at least truck a couple dudes who haven't even caught up to speed with him. So we'll see. But those are the 3 guys I'm looking at, but really Blackshear and Legette as the likely returners for kickoffs this season. Another question I have about special teams, because we're not going to talk about, who's going to make the roster and all that, because we know the 2 of the guys at least are going to make the roster, and J.J. Jansen and Johnny Hekker. I'm questioning whether Eddy Pineiro will also be on the roster, or if the Panthers will give him a new contract. Will there be a kicker competition or a kick controversy here in Carolina? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives. It might look like they have it all together on Instagram, but in reality, they probably don't. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have so you can start living your best life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime with no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Looking at the special teams battery this season, J.J. Jansen is back once again at long snapper, the longest tenured Panther, J.J. Jansen forever. Matt Rule, you tried and you failed. You're gone, but J.J. Jansen is still here. Johnny Hekker will also be back as the Panthers punter. Former All-Pro, was on the NFL All-Decade team and has been trying to show everybody, hey, I still got it, and he's still got it. Of course, those 2 are here, but there may be some controversy when it comes to the kicker spot, or should I say kick controversy, as Eddy Pineiro opted out of voluntary portion of the offseason. Now, understand, I put this in bold in my notes, and also not in all caps, but bold, voluntary. He didn't have to be there for OTAs. but he had to be there for mandatory minicamp, which he was there for, and he would not comment on why he was not around for OTAs, and it's not normal for a kicker to be missing. It's not. Now, Hecker talked about it. He's out there in Miami. He's working with his brother who's a kicker and all that, which is great. Still, why is the kicker not around? That's all we wanted to know, and Pinero didn't want to talk about it, but it has been assumed this has to do with his contract. Looking at his contract heading into 2024, Eddy Pineiro is set to make a base salary of $2 million, with $150,000 of it guaranteed. That cap number he has this season is $2.545 million. Cap savings, if they wanted to let him go, would be $1.85 million. And looking closer at what Pinero has done since 2019, he's top 3 in the NFL in field goal accuracy, but bottom 3rd in contracts among field goal kickers. According to Pro Football Reference, he's the 3rd most accurate kicker of all time. The NFL has had, I believe it's going to be like season 105. He is the 3rd most accurate kicker of all time, only behind Justin Tucker and Harrison Butker. He's made 89% of his kicks. Now, there's been years where he's made a lot of them, then he was still solid, and then a lot of them again, and then solid like last year. And I was kind of thinking that, he's been like kind of up and down. No. I got that one way wrong. And I admitted it when we talked about this back in June. This dude's pretty damn good, y'all. You can't lie. If he's the 3rd most accurate kicker of all time, maybe, just maybe, you should want to keep him happy. And looking at his contract at overthecap.com, his average annual value is 18th among kickers heading into the 2024 season. Looking at Justin Tucker, his is 4th. And Harrison Butker is at 16th. Maybe he needs a new contract with the Chiefs. 20th in total guarantees, Eddy Pineiro is with his contract. Tucker is 1st, which, makes sense. Harrison Butker is 11th. Again, probably needs a new contract there in KC. And then this is the kicker right here. No pun intended. The 24th in total value. So Pinero is 24th in total value among kicker contracts heading into the league this year. Tucker is 3rd. Butker is 8th. At least Butker's top 10 in that category. But if you're the 3rd most accurate kicker and top 3 since you've entered the league, maybe you should have a contract that pays you more than what he's getting paid heading into this season. And I would understand why you wouldn't want to be around. We have seen plenty of players who want new contracts at other positions who did not show up for the voluntary part of the offseason. Also didn't even show up for the mandatory part of the offseason. And do you begrudge them? Because no, show me the money. We saw Jerry Maguire, show me the money. And that's what Eddy Pineiro basically is telling the Panthers. He's like, good luck doing all your special teams work without me, as they just changed the rules. And this is not the offseason, not have your kicker out there. And I don't know if it benefits him to not be there, but still, he wants to get paid. And I think he has a pretty damn good argument to get paid as well. But because he wasn't around, Harrison Mevis, the thicker kicker out of Missouri, was able to show what he could do. And he has a big-ass leg, man. That's one thing about Pinero. He does not have the biggest leg. Zane Gonzalez did not have the biggest leg. Pinero does not necessarily have the biggest leg. He is accurate, certainly. And accuracy, of course, the longer you are, the harder it is to be accurate. We know how that works out. But he doesn't have the biggest leg in the world. And that's caused Panthers to decide to not kick at certain times. And it also depends on the stadium you're in, where the wind's blowing, all that. It's not just as simple as, he doesn't have a big leg. Well, what other nuances go into that decision? Harrison Mevis, though, 61-yard kick last year against K-State to walk off to win that game. Throughout his career at Mizzou, he has an 84% field goal make, only missed 1 extra point, but that doesn't really matter, as extra point is completely different in college than it is in the NFL. It's 35 or it's 20 in college. But Harrison Mevis, solid kicker, big ass dude. You think about the new kickoff rule. Well, if your kicker is built like a linebacker like Mevis is, maybe you're not too concerned about whether he can handle a tackle. I still think that he's probably going to get trucked, but maybe he might be able to lay a lick on somebody at some point in time. I wonder, will there be a true kicker competition? I don't think so. Now, a couple years ago, we had this with Butker coming out of Georgia Tech, who was drafted in the 7th round, and we had Graham Gano here in Carolina. Gano had been injured, came back, was solid for the Panthers, won that job. And Panther fans were like, well, should have kept Butker. There's a solid argument for that, but also understand that was a team heading into 2018 season that was expecting to be a playoff team. They had just come off the playoffs. They weren't going to risk not going to the playoffs because they had a young kicker who had not been in the situation. So we saw that Butker was pretty damn good as a rookie. So, okay, maybe miscalculation there, but still, that's the logic. And Graham Gano, as we've seen, has been a really good kicker once he got healthy. And when Matt Rule decided, well, let's get him out the door, let's bring in Joey Sly, who had already cost Panthers prior in 2019 and then cost them there in 2020 as well, as they kept trotting Joey out for the most comically long field goals in the history of the NFL, which, of course, he kept missing. And they just kept trying, and he kept missing. Hilarious how bad Matt Rule was, man. Hilarious. And also infuriating, of course. But they should have just kept Graham. And they probably should have kept Butker as well if they could have. Don't be in that situation again. Now, they're not going to be a playoff contender, in my opinion, this season. Anything can happen, of course. I just don't really see that happening. So you could risk it with Mevis. When your kicker is literally the third most accurate kicker in the history of the National Football League, maybe just give him the money and end all the silliness and let's move on. So that's my thoughts. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted again by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. Why? Because next Friday, the weekly Friday mailbag is back, y'all. So either at me or DM me to get those questions in to me, like next week. Not now, but next week. But on tomorrow's show, we talk about defense, talk about special teams, the state of the Carolina Panthers defense. We talked about earlier this offseason. How good was it really last year with all the changes coming in to Carolina this offseason, all new players? How good will the defense be this year? We'll talk about every aspect of the defense on tomorrow's show. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always and forever. Keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Tuesday.